So Deanna and I want to demonstrate the difference between squatting for mobility and when you're squatting under load, because we seem to have a lot of these battles and fights between trainers about squat depth and butt wink and screening things, and I think that we end up talking past one another, because the fact is the way you would move in an unloaded fashion, for instance an unloaded squat, is very different than how you would move with a heavy weight on your back. So we need to make sure that we decipher the two and we understand which two we're talking about. So if we're looking from a mobility perspective, then unloaded, I want Deanna to squat as deep as she possibly can, and I'm not worried about the butt wink thing, right? So I would just tell her, hey, you're going to take a number 2 in the woods, go down as deep as you can. Good, and she can go all the way down. And we're going to let her play with her stance. Maybe she has to turn her toes out a little bit so she can go as deep as she can. Maybe she has to spread her feet wider based on the structure of her hip joint. All right, so I'm not worried about this, what some people call the butt wink, which is really where the tail tucks under. We're talking about mobility, and your lumbar spine should be able to flex. Now, if we add a load to her back, this is our pretend load. So now we've got our barbell with whatever weight that's going to challenge her for 5, 6, 10 reps, whatever. Now things change. All right, so what we talked about earlier may be done in the beginning of the workout for mobility purposes, dynamic warm-up, however you'd like to label it. Now we're into the strength and conditioning portion, or the strength portion. So we've got a bar on her back. Now I want her to go into a nice lordotic curve, and I'm only going to let her go down as far as she can without losing that curve. So Deanna, go back down as far as you can. Right there. So just above that is where I would stop her, because then we start to see that tuck. So what I'm looking here is right in here. Again, I showed you this in the deadlift video. I can pinch some skin, and as soon as I feel her losing that, right there, I feel the skin starts to get pulled out from my fingers. That's when she starts to lose that lordotic curve, and she starts to go a little kyphotic. And at that point, she's not able to control as much load through there. All right, so as deep as she would go with a barbell on her back, go ahead down nice and slow, where I would stop her would be right there, right before she tucks. So that's drastically different than when we talked about mobility perspectives. Then again, though, the stance, I'll take this. The stance in regards to foot position and whatnot is going to be pretty consistent, because that's more geared towards her hip joint. So I just wanted to get you to understand the contrast between when we talk about squat depth, because squat depth in what? For mobility purposes or for loaded purposes, because they're not necessarily the same, and each of those deserves its own assessment or screening to individualize. One last